So Brown's training camp officially opened, and I need to talk to you about what just happened because it is already messy. Day 1. Not week 2, not preseason game 3, day 1, and we already have a story on our hands. I've been sitting here going back and forth through every angle, every clip, every source I can find, and I need to walk you through this properly because the gap between what happened with Shedeur Sanders and what happened with Deshaun Watson today is not a small gap. It is a canyon. Let's start with the man of the hour. Shedeur Sanders came out of the gate throwing absolute missiles. Deep shots to Cade Conception, connections with Denzel Boston, a rhythm with Luke Floria that looked less like day 1 of camp and more like week 6 of the regular season. And I want you to sit with that for a second, because rookie wide receivers are supposed to look lost in July. They're supposed to run the wrong route, drop the easy ball, get flustered by NFL speed. Instead, what I'm watching is a quarterback who is getting the ball out in 1, maybe 2 beats, finding these young guys in stride and making it look like they've been playing together for years. Here's the twist that makes this whole situation even juicier. Shedeur was working almost exclusively with the second-team offense today. Every single rookie receiver in that building was funneled into his group. Meanwhile, Deshaun Watson had the #1 offense, the starters, the guys who are supposed to make his job easier. And what did Watson do with that advantage? He threw 2 interceptions on back-to-back plays. Not 2 interceptions scattered across the day, back-to-back. One right after the other. I want to slow down on that moment because it matters. You don't throw 2 picks in a row by accident. Something breaks down mentally after the first one, and then it compounds. I watched the tape on both of them, and I'm going to be honest with you. The first one was rough, but the second one, the one where he tried to squeeze a dig route into a window that had already closed, that one made me wince. It wasn't a bad read that just didn't work out. It looked like panic. It looked like a quarterback pressing, trying to force something into existence instead of letting the offense come to him. Now let's flip back to Shedeur, because while all of this was unfolding, he was doing something that I think says more about him than any stat line ever could. After practice wrapped, when most guys are already halfway to the shower, Shedeur stayed out on that field with rookie quarterback Tyson Green, a 6th-round pick who is buried at the bottom of a crowded quarterback room and getting maybe 5 reps a day if he's lucky. Shedeur didn't have to do that. He is in the fight of his career right now, fighting for reps, fighting for a job, fighting for a starting role in a league that has already decided 100 different narratives about him before he's thrown a single regular season pass. And instead of hoarding every extra minute for himself, he's out there coaching up the kid nobody's talking about. I couldn't help but think back to last summer, when it was Myles Garrett staying late to work with the rookies, including Shedeur himself. Full circle moment. A year ago, Shedeur was the guy getting poured into. Now he's the one doing the pouring. That's not something you can fake for the cameras. That's character showing up when the cameras have mostly already left. Let's get into the numbers, because I promised you I'd track this. And the tracker does not lie. Deshaun Watson finished the day 12 for 22. That is barely 50% completion with the starters, against a defense that, sure, had some new money on it in Denzel Ward and Grant Delpit, both of whom just got paid and clearly wanted to show it. But still, 50% with 2 picks is not the story anybody wanted heading into a pivotal year for this offense. Dillon Gabriel went 7 for 9 but also threw an interception of his own, so it wasn't exactly a banner day for anybody wearing a starter's jersey, except for maybe Tyler Huntley in flashes. And then there's Shedeur, working with the twos, throwing to guys who have never taken an NFL snap in a real game, and he only hit the ground on 3 incompletions the entire practice. 3. That's it. No picks. Multiple explosive plays down the field. A touchdown that some people in the building think should have been ruled a score on the Cade Conception deep ball, though officially it might not count that way in a padless training camp setting. I've got sources inside the building, people who were physically standing on that practice field, telling me this was one of the worst practices Deshaun Watson has had since he arrived in Cleveland. Let that sink in. Not one of the worst days of this camp. One of the worst days, period, since he became a Brown. I don't say that to pile on the man. I actually want Deshaun Watson to play well. I've said this before, and I'll keep saying it. Because if Watson plays well, It only raises the ceiling for what this quarterback competition means. If the guy at the top of the depth chart is cooking, then every yard Shedeur takes from him means something. But if Watson is out here airmailing balls and turning the ball over twice before lunch, then this competition stops being a competition and starts being an inevitability. And look, I need to be fair here for a second, because I don't want to just pile stat lines on you without giving you the full picture. Watson is running the ball well. He looked mobile out there. Nobody's questioning the physical tools. The arm talent has never been the argument against Deshaun Watson. It's the decision-making, the anticipation, the ability to helm an offense under pressure without unraveling, and today, those were the exact areas that failed him. Meanwhile, there was a genuinely heartwarming moment buried in all this quarterback drama. Harold Fannin is back in the building. If you caught the post-practice interviews, he confirmed something that a lot of us had suspected but hadn't heard directly from him, that he'd been quietly working through a nagging groin injury that lingered from the end of last season. That's why he'd been missing time, and instead of easing back in slowly, the man said he wanted to jump right into drills with the rookies just to get his feet under him again. That's a small story compared to the quarterback chaos, but it matters for this offense going forward, especially with as much juice as this tight end room could bring if everybody's healthy. Let's go back to Shedeur's day though, because I don't think I've fully painted the picture of just how many flashes he gave us. There was the deep shot to Cade Conception that had the whole sideline buzzing. A ball that traveled what looked like 50-plus yards in the air, dropped perfectly into stride. There was the connection with Luke Floria on what I'm pretty sure was a wheel route out of the backfield, where Floria just came underneath completely uncovered, and Shedeur delivered it before the safety could even flip his hips. There was a quick rhythm throw to Rocket Sanders, a dink and dunk designed to just get the ball out and let the playmaker work, and Rocket did exactly that. There was a laser down low to Cade Conception on a second occasion, tight window, no hesitation. Over and over again, the same pattern showed up. Get the snap, one red, ball out. It's almost robotic in its efficiency, except it doesn't look robotic when you watch it. It looks instinctive. And I keep coming back to this idea of urgency, because that's really what separated these two quarterbacks today. Shedeur is playing like a man who knows the clock is running. Every rep matters to him. Every throw is an audition. You can see it in how quickly he's getting the ball out, how locked in he looks even in 7-on-7 drills that most vets would probably jog through. Deshaun Watson, by contrast, looked like a guy who is still trying to find his footing, still searching for whatever rhythm made him one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in this league before everything that happened over these last few seasons. I also want to mention the one incompletion Shedeur did have, because credit matters even in a good performance. It came off an all-out blitz look. He was trying to get a quick screen off in a hurry, but the pressure got home just a step too fast, and the ball got batted down at the line. That's on the protection more than the quarterback, but I want to give you the complete picture rather than just cherry-pick the highlights. There's also a shot of Deshaun Watson connecting with Cade Conception on a shorter route, so it's not like the entire day was a disaster for him individually. He had moments, still mobile, still flashes of the arm strength that made him a coveted quarterback not long ago. But moments aren't the same as a body of work, and on day one of a battle the fan base has debated for months, moments weren't enough to change the conversation. Let's talk about what happens next, because tomorrow, from what I'm hearing, Shedeur Sanders is expected to get reps with the first-team offense. That is a massive development if it holds. That means real receivers, real protection, a real test against a defense that isn't holding anything back. If Shedeur comes out tomorrow and produces anywhere close to what he did today, even against a legitimate first-team look, this conversation shifts from could Shedeur push for the job to how much longer can this front office actually wait. I keep thinking about how the media has painted these two quarterbacks all offseason. Deshaun Watson gets talked about like a proven guy who's earned the benefit of the doubt no matter how camp goes. Shedeur gets talked about like every single rep needs to be perfect or the doubters win. But when you actually watch the tape, when you actually track the numbers like I've been doing all camp, the story doesn't match the narrative. The story says a young quarterback who is out there taking care of the football, stretching the field, elevating the guys around him and staying after practice to build up a teammate who has almost no path to playing time this year. The narrative says something completely different, and that gap between story and narrative is exactly why I do what I do here, breaking this stuff down play by play so you don't have to just take somebody's word for it. There's one more piece of context worth mentioning on the offensive line side, because it factors into all of this. DeJuan Jones was working at left tackle. Wyatt Teller was at right guard. There were some early rotations at center that caught my eye too, guys shuffling in and out as the staff experiments with different combinations before the pads really come on. A couple of players, including Zadarius Smith, left practice a little early, nothing that's been flagged as concerning yet, but it's the kind of thing worth keeping an eye on as camp rolls forward. So where does this leave us after one single practice? Shedeur Sanders looked like the most in-control quarterback on that field, even while working almost exclusively with backups and rookies who've never taken a real NFL snap. Deshaun Watson looked like a guy searching for answers, throwing consecutive interceptions in a stretch that people inside the building are calling one of the roughest outings he's had since arriving in Cleveland. Dillon Gabriel had a mixed bag with a pick of his own. And through it all, Shedeur is the one you saw staying after the whistle, working with a rookie who barely gets on the field, building something that has nothing to do with stat lines and everything to do with who this guy actually is when nobody's forcing him to be a good teammate. I want to go back for a second to that second interception from Watson, because I don't think I gave it enough weight the first time. Picture the setup. He's coming off a pick just moments earlier, the sideline is tense, and instead of settling things down with an easy check down, he tries to jam a dig route into a window that had already collapsed. The ball floats a beat too long, and by the time it arrives, the window that existed when he released it doesn't exist anymore. That's not bad luck. That's the kind of decision that gets dissected in film rooms. And for a guy who is supposedly further removed now from the noise of these last few years, supposedly locked in and ready to prove people wrong, that sequence is exactly the kind of moment that reopens every question fans were trying to move past. Now contrast that with how Shedeur handled pressure today. Remember that all-out blitz look, the one where his screen pass got batted down at the line. Watch what he did on the very next opportunity. No hesitation, no flinch, no sign the previous rep was still sitting in his head. He came right back and delivered another accurate strike, like nothing happened. That's the difference between a quarterback who lets a bad rep bleed into the next one and a quarterback with the short memory this position demands. You cannot teach that, and right now it looks like Shedeur already has it while Watson is still searching. Let's talk about what this means for the locker room, because quarterback competitions don't just live on a stat sheet, they live in the way teammates start to look at each other. When rookie receivers who've barely been in the building a full month are already finding chemistry with a certain quarterback, that becomes the talk of the wide receiver room, whether the coaching staff wants it to or not. Players notice who gets the ball on time. And when Denzel Boston and Cade Conception are making the highlight reel with Shedeur on day one, that's a seed getting planted whether anyone wants to admit it or not. It's also worth noting how differently these two quarterbacks got covered depending on who was reporting. Outlets that spent the offseason hyping Watson's health and mobility went quiet on the two picks, framing it as both quarterbacks struggled early, which flattens an obvious gap into a false equivalence. 2 interceptions on back-to-back plays isn't the same tier of struggle as 3 incompletions with 0 turnovers against backups and rookies. Present those as roughly equal, and you're not describing what happened, you're managing a narrative. There's a psychological angle here too. Shedeur has spent his entire pre-draft process, and now his entire rookie transition, getting hit with skepticism from every direction. Every throw gets more scrutiny, every mistake gets amplified, every good performance gets explained away as small sample size. Instead of playing tight, instead of playing scared of the wrong headline, he's out here playing free, getting the ball out fast, trusting his reads instead of protecting the football out of fear. That's not the profile of a guy rattled by the noise. That's a guy who's decided the noise doesn't get to live in his head during actual reps. And that's exactly why the post-practice scene with Tyson Green hit me the way it did. It would have been so easy for Shedeur to walk off that field, take the win, let the tape speak for itself. Instead, He stays out there working with a player who has almost no realistic path to playing time this year, a sixth-round arm buried behind 3 other names. There's no strategic reason for that, other than genuinely wanting to build the guy up. Put that next to the Myles Garrett parallel from a year ago, and you start to see a culture forming that has nothing to do with who wins the job in August. It's the kind of thing that tends to pay off in December, when depth and chemistry decide games. Let's zoom out before we wrap up. This is day 1. There will be good days for Watson still coming, and probably a rough day for Shedeur down the road too, because that's how camp works. But what today established, backed by an actual quarterback tracker and not just vibes, is that the gap people assumed would separate a former starter from a rookie 5th-round pick simply didn't show up. If anything, it ran the opposite direction. So here's where I leave you. Tomorrow, Shedeur reportedly steps in with the first-team offense, real starters, real protection, a defense that isn't holding anything back. That is the actual test. Today was a strong impression against a lighter workload. Tomorrow tells us whether it translates when the competition gets real. If he produces anywhere close to what we saw today, this conversation in Cleveland stops being about potential and starts being about timing. I'll have my eyes on every rep, and I'll bring you the breakdown the moment it happens. Day 2 might make day 1 look like a warm-up, and given everything we just watched, that's not an exaggeration.